Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're jumping into this merger, or not merger, purchase of Netflix buying out Warner Brothers, and what does that mean in regards to, I guess, Netflix moving forward, in regards to Warner Brothers moving forward in terms of their some of the subsidiaries that they own, because a lot of people may not realize this, but they actually own DC and DC Comics, and that's probably the biggest thing that they really kind of own in terms of, obviously they handle movie studios and things of that stuff, Warner Brothers Studios. So in terms of just movie making in general, but this is a really big move for Netflix. It actually holds a lot of weight. Like I said, I don't know all the details deep into all the aspects that Warner Brothers owns, but I'm going to specifically talk in that realm of just movie production, along with DC Comics. Sorry, I had a brain fart there. DC Comics. Now, obviously any of the things that you've seen from the DC movie franchises came from them. So what this enables too, and not too long ago I had saw some information. I didn't end up reacting to it or put anything on it, but how they're possibly bringing back the DCEU, which was their movie universe that had Henry Cavill, who played Batman again. I'm having a brain fart right now. Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck played Batman. All that type of stuff. So there were talks about that coming back again. Obviously, that existed. Then eventually, it didn't. Then apparently, it's coming back again. So I'm not sure if that's 100% true or not, but all that type of property is owned by Warner Brothers, including the comics franchise. So obviously, one thing different from Marvel versus them was that Marvel didn't own all of their. Marvel's now bought up by Disney, but Marvel doesn't own all of their rights to their comic or the comic movie counterparts, all their characters in movie form. They don't own all of them. Unlike DC, where it's all under the brother of Warner Brothers, they own all of that, so they can utilize it however they want. So when you used to see shows like, well, Channel 11 used to be, if I'm not mistaken, owned by Warner Brothers, because they used to always say WB on it, or the CWB. I'm sure it was kind of like a mixing of different brands and companies at the same time, but nonetheless, it was Warner Brothers, DC, all wrapped up in there. So essentially, that's why you'd have their shows that would post up, as far as like the Arrowverse and all those kind of shows connected with that. Now with Netflix purchasing them, what you have is Netflix will not only have access to all of the studio power, we'll say, for lack of a better word, connected with Warner Brothers, they'll also have the rights to all the DC stuff. So if they want, they could straight take on Netflix DC movies if they want. They could actually do the whole MCU with Henry Cavill and all those characters straight onto onto Netflix. There is a bit of an issue with that though. Will they stop putting things in the movies? Now, I heard another content creator had speak on the fact that the movies is dead anyway, and to a degree that's true. But there still is that aspect of people going out there to see, going to the movie theaters for bigger movies or whatever the case is. And here, Netflix is primarily known for putting their stuff straight to Netflix. Even some of their biggest stuff, or stuff they don't realize is going to get that big. Like obviously something like K-pop Demon Hunters went viral, crazy. My little kids love watching it. That's the kind of thing that if it was in theaters would have made millions and millions of dollars. They even said it would have been the next Frozen. Now, when it comes to putting large movies straight to Netflix, obviously that's going to change the theme of things, because Netflix is known for streaming and they have that platform for streaming, and they're the most dominant streaming platform. So you have that as a thing in terms of you're probably going to them having collection access to whatever movies Warner Brothers owns, including obviously all the DC stuff, but whatever else that they might own. You now have the possibility that they'll put all that kind of stuff strictly and only on Netflix. So there is that. That is a possibility in terms of the reaction, or what this could mean for, things like DC, whatever the case is. Now, when it comes to when it comes to the realm of just their production in general, this will increase the quality that they have too, because I'm assuming now they will have, Warner Brothers should have access to large studios. Obviously, you would always hear the term Warner Brothers Studios. This means they have studios, large studios, movie studios. Netflix will now have access to that, which now grants the ability to make, obviously they would always port over films, like independent films. Independent filmmakers can put their films onto Netflix, but now they'll have the access to start making more original content, because now they have the backing of a full movie studio. So that's another thing that's going to change for Netflix. And the thing about it is that because Netflix is already the biggest streamer, and now you're going to have access to create more of your content. This also goes to show what could lie for the future, because essentially what you could end up having is similar to what Disney started doing, buying out Marvel, buying out Star Wars, buying out all these other franchises. What you might end up have happen is Netflix might try to do the same, within reason, because no one's going to be bigger than Disney in terms of purchasing power. But if they start buying a lot of these other companies, they start having the ability to increase their movie stock. And I'm not even referring to older movie stocks or shows, but making new ones, because the more that you own, the more that you have access to the companies that those larger companies own. Case in point, Warner Brothers owning DC. Now you have access to create all of DC comic content if you want. You could literally make your own, multi-platform universe, episodes, any kind of heroes you want, and any other things that Warner Brothers Studios might own, any other franchises they may own that I don't know about, but they could own, and they could have the mentality like, okay, we're gonna now build on those. There's a ton of other things that we could do with this. We're gonna build on those. So that is, moving forward, something that they have the power to do if they continue this practice of buying other companies, bigger companies that have studios, that have platforms that they can absorb into them, similar to the way Disney did with Star Wars and Fox. They did it with Marvel, obviously, early on, but then they did it with Fox. They did it with Star Wars. I think they did it with something else as well. And I know they collaborate with Sony. They don't own Sony right now. But yes. So they could be doing essentially the same thing. So what are your thoughts on that? What do you guys think? What do you think this means for the future of streaming? What do you think this means for the future of movies in general? Put this down below in the comments, because honestly, being that Netflix is the biggest platform for streaming, I hear that, from what I hear, I don't have any documented proof of this, but I hear that Disney Plus doesn't do well. I hear that all these other streaming services don't really do as good as Netflix. Netflix was the original, but even Netflix has its moments where it kind of wavers a little bit, but they started putting more original series, original documents, original, not documents, I'm sorry, original, I forget the word I'm looking for, but original shows, original, movies and all that kind of sort. So that helped them. But the more they start buying up things, they won't need to necessarily do original content from independent makers or things of that sort. Similar to, you had like that movie Rebel Moon. This was made from Zack Snyder. Didn't have a platform he could build on. He did on there. Now, I'm not gonna speak on the movie because I really didn't like it. But the point was that it was, Netflix was that platform that people can come to make independent stuff. Once they start buying out bigger companies like Warner Brothers, they will now have access to not just do independence, but whatever franchises that thing owns, and just expanding on it. I think, though, that this also means you're gonna see less stuff probably go in the movie theaters. You're gonna probably see less stuff go in the movie theaters because it's less risky to put it on Netflix, and I'm sure it costs them less to put it on Netflix than it does to put it on the movies. Even though, and this was Sony. Sony are the ones who created K-pop Demon Hunters, and they actually dropped the ball on that. I watched some content on that referring to how It could have been put in theaters. They didn't, especially when they put such a high production on it in terms of the cast, in terms of the writing, the story, the music. They then also, Sony being the owners of that, and mind you, Sony are the ones who've done the Spider-Verse. They know how to make animated movies and put them in the movie theaters, and they do really well. Spider-Verse movies did really well, but they they didn't have trust in K-pop Demon Hunters, yet they did put a lot of money into the production, which makes no sense. They kind of cut corners at the end to be like, well, you put this high production, why are you putting it on Netflix? You put this high production, you sourced out, they have their own music, because Sony has Sony for their movies, I don't know what that's called, and then you have Sony for their music, which I'm going to assume is Sony Music. They outsourced their music to a different company, and that company ended up having the rights to the music for K-pop Demon Hunters. So it was split in all these different directions. You got the movie over here, you got the music over here. Sony doesn't have the rights to the music. They can't gain money off of that. Yet it's not in the movie theaters. The movie could have been a blockbuster and made crazy in the movies, but you put it on Netflix because you were worried that it wasn't going to do as great. My point to that conversation is that certain things that might be made to go into the movies, a lot of companies might feel safer to put it on Netflix. Now, if Netflix now has ownership of Warner Brothers, a lot of movies, for the safety of it, because Netflix can put movies in the theaters. I think they actually did that with some of their movies. I'm not sure which ones, and if you guys know, you can put the comments down below. But if that's the case and they have these properties, they will be able to make the decision of, do we want to risk putting it in the movie theaters or not? Because we already have our own platform, which is the largest streaming platform. So you might say, why am I going to risk the fees of the movie theaters if it's not worth it? The problem with that, similar to what I just said with K-pop Demon Hunters, is that you might also miss the opportunity of a movie that's meant to be on the big screen now being done on the small screen. What do you guys think about that? How do you guys feel about that? Because for me, I would say certain movies should be on the big screen. I don't think that era should be lost, but the conveniency of once Netflix starts buying out companies, rather than the companies having the choice to say, do I want to go to movie theaters? Do I want to go to Netflix as a platform? Once Netflix is now the owner of these franchises and these different, companies or whatever the case is, what ends up happening now is it's no longer a choice of the third party movie company or whoever saying, do I want to put it there? It's now Netflix saying, do I want to put it there? But when they have their own it's their own platform, it's less likely that they're going to choose the more risky platform, even if that's how you'd want to see that movie. Imagine there's a new amazing, not that we want them to start fresh from DC again, because it's all over the place, but if they made a new DC Comics movie and it's really big and everyone's big anticipation for it, and you know it should be in the theater, and they just go, you know what, just to play it safe, we're going to put it on Netflix. That is a thing. That might be a shame. A lot of people might say, I'm a fan, I don't want to see that happen. So, like I said, comment what your thoughts are down below. How do you guys feel about that? Let this be a discussion. If you guys want, we can have another discussion video on this. I would love to hear what your thoughts are in regards to that. But obviously, these are big moves that are being done by this company. And like I said, we're going to cover so many other types of things. So just put in the comments what your thoughts are, and we'll cover it. As always, you guys, like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.